Giving free one-sided therapy to the stars of reality. It's Rachel and Kacie with CBT and the TV. CBT and the TV.
Hello, darlings, dears, and fellow queers, and welcome back to another episode of CBT in the TV. As always, I am Kacie, not Rachel.
And I am Rachel, not Kacie.
And this week, we will be venturing into the super lovely time that is Dance Moms Season 1, Episode 8. Boy, is it just an interesting... It's an interesting week. This episode, almost the whole thing has the feel of Vivi going to audition for Abby.
It's hyper production.
So produced, and so it feels very uncanny valley and weird.
I very much watched it with that production eye for that certain part that we will talk about, and I will very much have something to say about it, but
there's a lot of little bits to talk about, and it's an interesting ride. And to make it better, we're even in Orlando. Let's visit Rachel and Kacie's Start of Fun. I'm gonna grab our goodie for the week. And since this is apt, since we're about to delve into a lot of stuff that's not the most fun, let's talk about something that gives us something fun to do. Rachel, what is your favorite video on YouTube for a quick pick-me-up?
I think it really just depends on my mood and what strikes me. Sometimes I just want to belt out some Broadway show tunes, so I may throw on like a karaoke track.
Or a good slime tutorial for those of us in the know.
Oh, yes, a good slime tutorial.
Broadway slime tutorials are the best.
Fabulous. Or baby laughing video, like funny babies. Especially babies laughing. You just can't, you can't not laugh when a baby laughs.
True. In our household, we love ourselves some mythical, particularly Good Mythical Morning is big in our household. And we love Eat the Menu with Keith Habersberger. Let's check in with our snacks and drinks of the day, and we invite all of our listeners to feed and hydrate themselves along with us. Rachel, what you got going? I think I saw something.
You did, and I thought about you as I was heating it up in the microwave. It's mac and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese. But is it cheese and macaroni? Is it the blue box, Rachel?
It is.
Good. As the world as it should be.
Box. The only kind
exactly
of box.
The only kind that matters. If you're in Canada, Kraft Dinner, Kraft, whatever it is, macaroni. That is the kind that is correct. All right. And what do you have to drink, Miss Rachel?
Primarily water, but I also have a melted milkshake.
I am having some freeze-dried strawberries. Super yummy. And one of my favorite things about this is it makes it seem like I'm eating solid food, but they dissolve into nothing in your mouth. Spoonie hack for all my friends out there. And then I just finished my emotional support Alani energy drink. And I have what is this? Sparkling water.
Thermos.
Without further ado, we can't delay any further. I mean, we could, but it wouldn't be a good idea. We're gonna have to get into this. We open the episode and find out that we're already on the road. Nobody went home. They didn't go back to Pittsburgh. They are in Orlando already at a Star Power competition. And the girls are getting out of the van and going into their dance studio away from dance studio. And Abby calls them in for Pyramid, and we actually get to see the setup that we know as Pyramid moving forward. The headshots are taped up on the dance mirror at the front of the classroom, covered with paper, so we don't know who's who. It feels homey, which is weird because it's the first time we're not at home for Pyramid, and it's the first time we see what we know of as the Pyramid. Abby actually goes over quite a bit of the Pyramid this week, and of course, before she can get into that, she does have to yell at the girls and the moms for something that they have absolutely no control over, which is that Kathy and Vivi aren't there because, Abby reveals the bottom 2 places on the pyramid have gone to Kenzie and Vivi, and she tells Kenzie that she and Vivi were actually supposed to have a duet this week, but since Kathy and Vivi are absent, she's not sure how that's going to go. Maybe Kenzie's going to do the dance by herself, and I hate that she, dangled a Kenzie solo in front of us, and then we never get it. Next up,
it sounds like it was a solo they had already learned.
I think it was a duet they already knew. And we know from past experience, it would be the future in the case of what's happening presently to the girls. But we know from later seasons of the show that Abby would take people's duets and turn it into a solo. She had no problem doing that. So I don't know why she wouldn't have done this for me. We're never going to understand Abby. We shouldn't try to understand Abby. It is futile. Next up on the pyramid, on the bottom row, is Chloe. And Abby tells Chloe that she wants her to take the week off to work on her technique. And that while she's happy with Chloe's performance in her solo last week and was pleased that Chloe took 4th place, she doesn't think that Christy was happy with it. And she doesn't think that Chloe was either. In an interview, Chloe tells us that she wishes Miss Abby had picked another time to give her a week off. Christy tells us that she wishes Abby would learn to take her frustrations with Christy out on Christy instead of taking them out on Chloe as a way to punish Christy. And Rachel, I really want to hear what you think about Abby saying that, Abby telling Chloe that she was happy with Chloe having taken 4th place when we know Abby's never okay with 4th place. The only, and here's the thing, we remember from last episode that we didn't get to hear how any of the girls placed except for Maddie. So unless Chloe took 4th and everyone above her was an Abby dancer, Abby's never going to be okay with 4th. But because they didn't show us this, we have no way of knowing who the people that took the top 3 ahead of Chloe were. We have no way of knowing if they were Abby dancers, other studios, a mix. We don't know. But what do you think of Abby saying this to Chloe? Like, I was happy with what you did. It's just you and your mom that weren't.
I feel like it was an attempt to build distrust in Christy.
Okay. And we know she wants to do that. Next on the pyramid is Nia. Holly tells us in an interview that she wasn't surprised that the judges didn't love They Call Me Laquifa, and that she was glad that they didn't place it highly. She applauds them for not rewarding this kind of thing. And she's also not surprised with Nia's placement on the pyramid. She says she sort of saw it coming. I think all of us at home did too. Where none of us are surprised. We all hope for better. I think Holly did too. Like, it would be nice if we saw Nia up at the top of the pyramid, but none of us thought that was where things were headed. Abby tells Nia that she was happy with her performance, but that her mom was not happy with her choreography, and that she needs her mom not to cause any more altercations like there were in Connecticut. And she directs all of this right towards Nia, right? She's not looking at Holly. She's not talking to Holly. And Holly corrects Abby and goes, "It was a conversation." And the way she says it, I'm like, yay, Holly, we love Holly. And Abby then corrects herself and goes, "Fine, I don't want any more conversations like we had in Connecticut." Holly tells us in an interview that she thinks of an altercation as something that is threatening, and she was only trying to talk to Abby about issues of accountability, and she wanted to make sure that Abby was aware of what was going on and what she was doing. And she wanted to make sure that they were all being held accountable, like everyone was being above board. Wanted to talk with you, Rachel, about the difference between being attacked and being held accountable, and why people in certain places of power and certain groups of privilege or power, why they can't seem to understand the difference between being held accountable and being attacked. Why they think when you're being held accountable, someone's attacking you. What's the psychology behind that, if we know anything about it?
I mean, I think, and we see this a lot, particularly, and not to, I mean, if we're looking at the most privileged group in the United States, it's going to be cis-het evangelical men. And anytime that they feel like somebody could be almost infringing upon their rights so as to have an equal shot at something. They no longer feel like they have the upper hand, the benefit. And that for somebody who is so used to privilege and that sort of entitlement, I don't necessarily like to use that word in this context, but that's really what privilege leads to, is an entitlement. When they no longer have that entitlement, and it's really uncomfy for them. And this is a very uncomfy episode. And so let's, address that there is a great discomfort, I think, for Abby in feeling like being confronted with this bias is an attack. It's an altercation, so to speak. I tend to see altercations as physical, so I'm not really sure why she chose that particular word. But I think for her, it's a matter of that, like, cognitive dissonance and being uncomfortable, being confronted with something that is wrong.
I think one of the things that's helpful to remember about Abby was the week of electricity. She said that Holly and Christy, when they talked to her about how deeply inappropriate they felt the performance was, they said that Abby said that they verbally assaulted her. When, from what I remember watching, Christy and Holly, they were upset. They'd seen something upsetting and they were upset, but they were composed. They were still trying to have a calm and rational conversation with Abby. They weren't, we've seen Christy, and we will eventually see Holly at their breaking points of not being calm. We've already seen Christy there. We will see Holly. They weren't that in the moment where they were saying, like, hey, we were really uncomfortable with electricity, and Abby still qualified it as a verbal assault. I think that's like, having grown up with two narcissists, that's part of narcissism. They take whatever you did and they make it like the next level. If you're talking to them about something they find you shouldn't be questioning them about, and we'll see this again with Abby later in this episode with the barking thing, you've insulted them and you are accosting them. So I think that's why she chooses the word altercation, because to her, this is violent. Anything that isn't, complimentary and adulation and applause is violent. And that to me is always, again, I think that's something, I don't think you could explain it to myself or our listeners why narcissists are like that. I think that's something we're never going to understand, but it is how they function. So I think that's why she chose that word. And groups of power that react with, because entitlement has a certain connotation, right? But when you've been given like an open door after open door, green light after green light after green light, we're not saying you feel entitled to everything, like you personally feel entitled to everything, but you haven't really been told no about a lot of stuff. Not that you've never been told no, but you haven't been told no about a lot of stuff. So when all of a sudden you are told no, or you're asked to do something in a little bit different of a way, that feels very affronting, and it feels like you are being attacked. And it's not just, white men, it's white people that can fall into this trap. People who live in the global north can fall into this trap. Able-bodied people can fall into this trap. All of these things, because you've not been exposed to the other side of it. And until you are, you have no idea what it's like. Unfortunately, we don't get any information on the middle row of the pyramid, but by deduction, we can tell it is both of the Highland girls, and that just feels so apt about, like, who are we not going to talk about? We're not going to talk about the Highland girls. We're not going to talk about Brooke and Paige, because why? Why would we talk about them? I thought it was weird that the editors removed it, because they had to have. It's not like, because it's with the way that pyramid was set up, like if we were at chalkboard where Abby just turns around the chalkboard and all the photos are uncovered, Abby could have just skipped over them. But with the way that pyramid was set up this week, she had to have uncovered their pictures. So she had to have said something. So it's weird to me that they left it out.
It probably just wasn't enough drama.
I know that, but it's still like, they like in later seasons, they leave in the parts where they're like, and here's her, and here, like, it just feels extra weird. I know they were still figuring things out. It's early days, it's early years, whatever, however you want to say it, but it still feels weird. Maddie, of course, is at the top. Not that she doesn't deserve it. She worked very hard. She did a very good job, but it gets hard to talk about the same person over and over and over again when Nia also was in such a tough place last week, and all the kids had solos or duets, and Maddie is the one that's at the top. It would put them all in a line, or don't do the pyramid at all. I don't know. Abby tells her that her costume was gorgeous, her performance was great, but that she doesn't want to see the tears anymore. And when I watched this, because this is my Dance Moms has been one of my comfort shows for forever, but I'm watching it this time with a very different lens. And there was always certain parts of Dance Moms that would like pop out at me. I'd be like, oh my God, this is terrible. But because I'm being so analytical this time, there's a lot more that's popping out at me. And this was one of those moments where I was like, wait, did she find out why Maddie was really crying? Or does she still think that Maddie was crying because she was hurt? I mean, neither of which is an okay thing to say to an 8-year-old, you can't cry. But dear God and dear Lord, I sincerely hope she found out that Maddie was crying because she was embarrassed. It's bad enough for you to be telling an 8-year-old, don't cry if you're stressed and overwhelmed, and then something happened that caused that dam to break. It's so much worse if you're telling that 8-year-old, don't cry because you twisted your ankle. So much worse. You don't think it can get worse, but somehow, magically, Abby, that's her superpower. She can make everything worse.
I have a feeling that Melissa probably did tell Abby. Like I don't doubt.
I do too, but it did make me wonder, because I feel like you're right. I feel like Melissa would have said something. I feel like she would have figured it out or found it out one way or another. But I could also, like, another kid, like with Chloe, no one would have told her about Chloe except for maybe Melissa if someone had told her. And she would have said, I could see her saying the exact same thing to Chloe. And
I could see her saying the same thing to Mackenzie.
That's exactly what I'm saying. She says it to Maddie because she doesn't want Maddie to embarrass herself or embarrass her. But I could see her saying it to one of the other kids, even if it was because they were hurt. And that's the problem I have with it. Abby begins talking about the group dance for the week. We are doing another jazz routine, and it is called Snapshot. And we can kind of tell that something's going to be different about this week's group. Abby's talking in this way that, like, all the narcissists I know, they talk this way when they're about to, like, make a big announcement or they think they're doing something cool, where, like, I can't imitate it because I don't have it in me. I don't know, but she, like, to me, it always kind of reminds me of Barney. That's how I've always equated it. Like, it's overly animated, and they talk to everyone like they're a little kid, and like they think they're presenting something big and magical, but like they're presenting it like they're on a kid's TV show. And that's what Abby's doing. She's like doing the Dora Explorer, like, I say this, can you say? What about this? Is what goes with this? That's what it's so weird. And she's asking the girls, like, you're all gonna play models. What happens when you're a model? And you can tell the girls also feel weird about this. Like, even Mackenzie and Vivi, when she does this with them, they're like, why are you talking to me like this? I'm not 2.
I think it's an attempt. So when we're born, we have these neurons called mirror neurons. And they're the ones that, like, if you stick your tongue out at a baby, they're naturally going to stick their tongue out too, because they're mirroring you. And I think that that's one of the ways that a narcissist attempts to elicit empathy. They kind of, they want you to follow their lead in that way. And they think that if they're acting a certain way, that you'll follow, because that's what they know. Like, they know, if I am this way, they'll follow.
Well, and we know, like, when I say Miss Rachel on this podcast, I'm usually talking about Rachel over here. Rachel, not Kacie. But in this case, I'm going to be talking about the actual Miss Rachel as we know her, of being Miss Rachel on YouTube, like the Miss Rachel. She uses the idea of mirror neurons and all of that to engage speech and help build bonding experiences between parents and their younger children. Those are very important. And as an early educator, I know that those are very important. What I've noticed with the narcissist in my life, and then what I noticed with like Kacie and Abby, both of them do this. And I'm not saying I can diagnose either of them with narcissism, but I can say that they have narcissistic tendencies for sure. And those are two different things. They all do this thing, and they do it with the adults around them. Like all the people with narcissistic tendencies that I know do this with adults, and they never outgrow it. They're not doing it to be developmentally appropriate with younger children. Like that's the thing. That's why Mackenzie and Vivi are like, I'm not watching Blue's Clues right now, because some of the media that these kids would have been consuming would have still been kind of geared this way, and it's appropriate there. It's not appropriate in their educational settings anymore. It stopped being appropriate halfway through kindergarten. And that's the part that like all of them feel weird about it, and the moms especially are like looking at it and they're like, don't talk to us like this. This feels weird. So Abby keeps doing the thing, like asking the girls what goes along with you walk on the catwalk. What else is at a fashion show? And I think one of the girls answers like a photographer, and Abby's like, yes, a photographer. So that's how we find out that they need someone to play the photographer, and Abby has decided that it won't be one of the girls. It won't be a special part for anyone on the team. She's going to bring in a boy. So Abby has decided that the part of the photographer will be played by a boy. She's bringing in one of the boys from her studio. This is going to cause some drama for this week. Abby makes a point of telling us that this particular boy, whose name is Brandon and his mom, Diane, enter the room. She says Brandon is an excellent dancer, and he dances like a man. Dances very masculine on stage. All of her boys do. And I really want to take a minute to address the way that Abby talks about young boy dancers or young mask presenting dancers. It is awful. Her like the last season of Dance Moms, when they tried to bring it back for season 8, she did a lot of stuff that was really inappropriate with Brady, the boy who was on the show. She would swap names with Brady and her boyfriend, Abby's boyfriend at the time. Brady has gone on record saying it made him feel very uncomfortable. There was a child that appeared on the show, Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition, and then would later join the Candy Apples team, who is trans. And both Abby and a choreographer that was involved in, I think both shows, I'm pretty sure, made comments about this child, and they didn't care who this child slept with as long as they danced like a man. Which, what child is sleeping with anyone when they're no adult needs to worry about a child's love life unless they're in danger. And B, what does who a child is sexually attracted to or romantically attracted to have to do with their gender identity? If any teacher in your life is talking to you about your gender identity, your sexual orientation, any of these things in a way that is not supportive or makes you feel 100% comfortable and seen and heard and loved in a way that you feel comfortable shouting from the rooftops, you would talk to your parents about it happily, you would talk to all. If any of it makes you feel like maybe I shouldn't tell people about this, start screaming. Don't stop screaming until someone listens to you and takes you seriously, because all of this is not okay. Anyway, Brandon enters the dance studio, and we can immediately tell that Brooke is not impressed. All the little girls are excited, but they're excited in that way that, little girls are like, oh, something weird and different is happening. And it's a page says like, he's so weird. And it's cute. The moms are excited that their friend is there. But it's going to add to that feeling of we're in the uncanny valley. Brandon being here this week adds to that feeling. And I 100% believe that production was behind this. I have a feeling that all of Abby's studio was already at this competition, so I don't think they actually had to bring Brandon down to Orlando, but I think that production, it was very easy to convince Abby to do this because he was already there for the competition. Abby goes on to tell us that Brandon is now old enough to do partner lifts, and that's why she has him here for this dance, because she wants there to be a budding romance between one of the models and this photographer, and of course that's going to mean Brooke and Brandon. And this partner work is going to be quite a crux of some drama in this episode, some of which we can completely see coming. If you haven't seen this episode and you think you know what's about to happen, you're probably somewhat right, at least. Some of it way, way, way out in left field, and you're going to be like, what? Yeah, but that's Dance Moms for you. And Abby closes out the pyramid telling all of the children and all of the moms that just because they're here in Orlando doesn't mean they're here to have fun, go on rides, or soak up any of the sun. They're here to work because, heaven forbid, children should enjoy themselves. It's now time for rehearsal, and we get a look at what the group dance is going to look like. I have heard this dance described as like the worst dance in Dance Moms history. I don't think what the group is doing is that bad. I think what, like Christy says, she thinks this is the worst dance in Dance Moms history. I think what makes it so bad is the partner work that Abby has Brooke and Brandon doing. It is very suggestive, and it's made so much worse by the fact that I don't know what it was this week, but Brooke just looked so little. She had her hair up in this cute little side pony, and I don't know, she just looked like a little teeny tiny baby girl. And
well, as we've discussed, like, she's built much more petite.
She is built much more petite, but she can dance much more maturely. But I think because she felt so awkward about what was going on, she is swinging that like young. This dance ended up reminding me a lot of Electricity, particularly the partner work, because what we talked about with Electricity is the dance by itself, if you put them in a different costume, it would still be kind of gross, but it wouldn't be as bad as pairing it with the costume. It's all the things put together make it really yucky. And if you just took the partner work that Brandon and Brooke are doing, or if you took parts of the partner work, it's like, oh, well, that's a little bit of swing dance-ish. That's a little bit but when you put it all together, and then also the costumes are bathing suits for the girls, and Brandon's costume, he's fully clothed. It looks and feels yucky. Well, and
things got uncomfortable for that.
I do have some about that. I wanted to make sure we gave it its whole own section to talk about, because that's going to be a whole thing. So as the rehearsal goes on, she's giving Brooke and Brandon more and more to do partner-wise, and Brooke and Brandon seem to finally like get the idea of like, oh, we're going to be doing this again. And Abby comes in an interview and tells us she knows that Brooke and Brandon used to have a little fling at the studio, and she does that over-animated Abby in an interview thing that just gives me the ick, especially talking about this kind of stuff. I hate when grown-ups talk about kids' love lives. I hate that I had to say the sentence, grown-ups talk about kids' lives. But I feel like most of our listeners would know exactly what I mean when I say that. And I wanted to ask Rachel, like, do we have any idea why some adults, like I've worked with little kids, like I've worked with children who are like infant age all the way up to age 13, 14. And always, no matter what age group I was working in, there were always parents that were like, oh, they're like a boy and a girl were friends, and they're like, oh, maybe they'll get married. What is with this?
I don't know.
We don't know.
What I do know is that it tends to be heteronormative.
Yes, very heteronormative. Unfortunately, I've never seen.
I don't know that I've ever heard a gay person say that about their child.
Yeah, it does. It is usually when parents are talking about it, it's almost always heteronormative. And we don't know why people do it.
I don't know why people. I have not figured humans out enough yet.
And this is when we find out that Brooke and Brandon were long-standing duet partners, and that it's important for us to all, like, I want everyone to take a step back and remember that these are two children Brooke is now like maybe 13 and a quarter. And I think Brandon's like a year older than her. And when they're talking about when they used to like each other, they keep referring to like a couple or a few years ago. So a couple and a few years ago, these were like elementary school students. This is so, like, I expect it from Abby. I hate that I have to say that, but she's not the only one who's going to make some comments this week, and I hate it. I hate all of it. The moms have made their way up to the lobby of this dance studio, and they throw together kind of a DIY dance jail. They scoot some chairs together into a semicircle, and Christy gently teases Holly about correcting Abby during Pyramid, and then asks Holly to tell them more about it. And Holly tells them that she's just sick of the whole situation, and she's tired of Abby making every interaction out to be an altercation. She says Abby's making everything so dramatic when it doesn't have to be, and that Abby characterizing every one of their conversations together as a confrontation is harmful. And she tells the moms that she isn't the kind of person who tries to make everything into a fight, and she really doesn't appreciate being painted this way. And I'm really glad that the editors kept this portion in the episode, like the whole thing. I'm sure they talked about it more, but I'm glad they kept this whole bit in from Holly, because whether Abby knows it or not, and whether the editors know it or not, they can very easily paint Holly as the stereotypical angry Black woman. Abby thinks that Holly is antagonistic, and they would have a very easy time of it editing her to look that way. And if the editors had just left even a little part of this bit out, they'd be upholding that so hard. And Holly would have no recourse, because the thing is, when you sign up to do a documentary or a docuseries or a reality show, you give up control of what you say. They can cut it together however they want to make it sound however they want. And I usually am not ever on the side of the editors or happy with anything the editors did, but I'm very glad that they did not do this to Holly. They do enough damaging things to Holly. I am glad that we got this bit. And I want to remind our listeners, our viewers, whoever's out there, that being direct isn't being rude, and it's not being angry. And marginalized people get told that over and over and over again. If they're being direct, they're rude, they're angry, they're aggressive. You're not. The moms then talk about Abby making a point of telling Chloe that she needed to take a week off, and about her awful comments about Chloe's score. And while Abby was happy with 4th place, she thought that Chloe and Christy weren't. And I thought that this whole thing was weird, because again, it's not like we didn't even know what place Chloe took. I don't know why the editors let this part in. I don't necessarily think it's weird what Abby said. It's what I expect from Abby. But I think it's a weird thing on the part of the editors. They left out all the stuff about the solos last week. Why are they bringing it up? Yeah, it reeks of weird production and poorly done editing. And also, I think not being aware that streaming was coming, because they didn't think we were going to be able to play this on repeat in perpetuity and be like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Diane, Brandon's mom, tells us in an interview that she's sitting with all these moms and wondering what the hell she got herself into. And Diane clarified on the Back to the Bar podcast about this particular episode of Dance Moms that production 100% made her say this. She's best friends with both Christy and Kelly. Like, the three of them are a threesome, which is very important for you to know about the rest of this episode. And she had been at Abby's studio. She's been at had her kids dancing at Abby's studio as long as Kelly has had her kids dancing at Abby's studio. She was there before Christy. And so the idea that she had no idea what was going on, like, no. And the idea that she was surprised by the moms being upset with Abby, also really, really no. But she didn't want to be on the show, and she did not like the 1 week she had to be there. She was glad to get to hang out with her friends again, because they were always gone now, but she was just like, I just said whatever they wanted me to so I could get out of that interview room quick, because back in rehearsal, Abby is, of course, screaming at Brooke and Brandon about how they're not doing their lifts right, they're not looking at each other, they don't have chemistry, they're not emoting. And the moms are looking down into the rehearsal space from the upstairs mezzanine, and Kelly tells Diane that Brooke and Brandon had better connect while they're dancing. And in an interview, Kelly tells us that she thinks these two still like each other, and that's why Brooke and Brandon are acting this way. Personally, I think that they're acting this way because all the grown-ups who are around them are acting weird, and they can feel it, and it's giving them a complex and stressing them out, so they're shutting down.
And there's the awkwardness of we used to like each other, and now we have to act like we do again.
I think this is something that gets overlooked by adults. The way you like someone as an elementary schooler is vastly different from how you like someone at the end of middle school. Is vastly different from how you like someone in high school. Is vastly different from how you like or love someone as an more fully formed adult. And I think the further you get away from childhood, if you don't learn about it, you can forget that. And so I think they're not that because adults are so quick to tell kids when they, have a crush or have their first girlfriend or boyfriend or joy friend, oh, you're too young, you don't really know what love is. But then if they're in a situation like this where they're like, we don't really like each other anymore, the adults will be like, you're not taking this seriously enough. We're constantly telling kids that they're either taking things too seriously or not taking things seriously enough. You can't have it both ways. Yeah. Just like we talked about last week with Melissa and Maddie, you can't have a kid who's mature enough to handle all this stuff on their own, and you love that, but then has the attitude of a person who is mature enough to handle everything on their own. You can't have it both ways. This sort of thing happens with kids and their grades. You tell kids they take it too seriously and they need to be more of a kid, and then they slack off, and then you're like, who told you could slack off about your grades? I think this,
you did.
The way these adults are acting is so applicable to so many other things aside from romantic feelings of children, which, again, I just don't think, unless the children are in danger, I do not think you need to be involved in. Leave them alone. It does only make things worse in this situation. We're going to watch that happen, and it only ever serves to make things worse in real life. This was some people's real life, but I'm talking to our listeners. That will only serve to make things worse in real life. Let them talk to you. You don't need to be constantly talking at them. There's a difference between talking to someone and talking at them. And all of these adults are just talking at these two.
And there's a lot of different things that they're being told, and always. A lot of conflicting, which, who is telling me the right thing? Which way do I go?
Even if you just left it to Abby to be the one talking to these two, she's going to be saying so much conflicting stuff. Just her. Yeah. That's more than enough for these two. But we've got so many adults. It's too many for me to list right now. We've got at the very least Abby and Gia and their moms and at least one production person. That's already far too many, but that's not all of the adults that are talking to them about it. That's
for sure not.
And that's far too many. Chill down, everybody. Leave them alone. Unless they're in danger, and they're not. Except from Abby. And no one's getting on Abby nearly enough this week about this. Abby then asks Brooke and Brandon what it means to have chemistry with someone, because they don't have it right now, and she wants to know if they know what it means. And, this just puts them even more on the spot. That's not going to help anybody, but this is Abby, and she loves to do this. Brandon says it means that you have a lot of emotion for the other person. You have a lot of feelings for them. And she says, yes, absolutely. Now, Brooke, what does it mean to you? And Brooke, being...
in her very Brooke way.
Yeah, it being the most Brookie she can be, she goes, yep, same thing. And even Abby thought this was funny. Even Abby went okay, Brooke, because Brooke is the queen of deadpan. You can't not laugh. She is everything. We then get to watch some more of the partner choreography that Brooke and Brandon have been given. And again, this is where it starts. Abby has Brooke be lifted by Brandon, and then they have to slide down. She has to slide down his front, which again, if she didn't already have to wrap her legs around his trunk, and I don't know, it's too, if you just had one of these things, it would be oh, okay. But all of them together, it's gross.
Mm-hmm. It's too mature of choreography.
It's too mature of choreography, and it doesn't match, the music that's playing it's a very cute, bubbly piece. It doesn't match, and it doesn't match what the rest of the girls are doing. it feels it makes everything feel even more out of place and even more yucky. Rehearsal ends with Abby dismissing all of the younger girls, and then she tells Brooke and Brandon and their moms that she's going to send them on a date because they need to work on their chemistry. They need help building it up. And again, I don't know. I'm sure that this was production. I'm sure production had some hand in this, but I don't know how. And looking at it from the production side, I'm sure they were just doing it for drama, because I can't see how this was going to help anything other than beef up the runtime and add more drama. I can't see how this was actually going to help anyone with that.
It wasn't.
Next up is Nia's solo rehearsal, and we find out that she is doing a Bollywood routine. It is important to note that Bollywood is a dance that has to be done very precisely. It's almost like doing ballet. There's a right and there is a wrong, and if you're doing it wrong, you're offending somebody. It's true. If you do ballet,
I mean, honestly though, even if Abby has somebody do it right, Abby's probably offending somebody by doing.
Well, yes, and that's the thing. That's the next thing I was going to say. Abby shouldn't even really be teaching anyone ballet. She's not a good ballet teacher, but she especially should not be teaching anyone Bollywood. I also do not love that she is giving Nia a Bollywood piece, because Abby is not the person to be teaching anyone Bollywood. I also don't think she's giving Nia a Bollywood routine because she wants to give Nia something interesting or to help expand her repertoire. Based on what we heard Abby say last week, she gives Nia certain dances so that she can play parts of other backgrounds. And I'm sorry, Nia can't play Indian. And this is yucky, because I think that's why Abby did it.
Oh, for sure. To kind of almost FU to Holly, after their conversation where she's saying, I'm going to send her to these ethnic casting calls. I think that's really the only reason that Abby is giving her.
I think she gave Nia a Bollywood routine because Bollywood, of all the ethnic dances, has to be done the most perfectly. And she believes that Nia can't pull it off. So she gave her a dance that, like, sure, it's got a lot of dance content to it, but she doesn't believe Nia can do it. But I also, I don't think, again, like we talked about last week, Abby is not the person to be teaching anyone anything having to do with any culture other than beige white bitch. And this isn't a beige white Becky dance. If she's going to have Nia do a Bollywood routine, she needs to bring in a Bollywood choreographer. You can't teach that to her, Abigail. And it's not okay for you to try either. I could study Bollywood myself for 40 years, and it would still never be okay for me to teach someone Bollywood. Abby calls Holly in to watch Nia's rehearsal, and we find out that since Holly insisted that Nia be given a solo that features a lot more dancing than marching around the stage and making faces, Abby said she would only do it if Holly attended the rehearsal, and so she agreed. So she's there to take notes, and she has her little notebook. She's taking notes in the corner. Abby, of course, tells us a different side of the story from the one Holly just gave us, and says that she made Holly come to watch Nia's private lesson today because she doesn't understand that kid, meaning Nia, cannot correct herself. This whole thing is icky, and again, it made me want to flick my screen, and I had to remind myself that doesn't actually do anything to Abby. Abby, of course, spends the entire rehearsal yelling at Nia, and Holly tells us that while she's glad that Nia's getting another chance to be featured and show her dance ability, she's not sure that she would have picked another ethnic dance for Nia. She also says that she's worried that the reason Abby gave Nia this particular dance in this particular style is to try to show Holly what happens when you hold Abby accountable. Sort of like malicious compliance, but usually I enjoy a good bit of malicious compliance, but not this kind. Abby tells us in an interview that she just doesn't get why these moms can't understand that she wants everyone to win, and we have so much evidence already from this season that that's not true. So, Rachel, do we know why narcissists tell these kinds of lies, the kinds that we have like an abundance of proof to be like, but that's not true. Why do they do that? Do we know?
So I've heard a combination of things. I've heard some people say, well, the narcissists like wholeheartedly believe their lies, but I've also heard that the narcissists don't believe their own lies for a second, but they think that you're dumb enough to believe their lies. So I think some of it is probably Abby wanting to control a narrative. I think some of it is she thinks that we or Holly or whomever is going to be stupid enough to actually believe her lies, and in that we end up siding with her.
Got it. I hate it, but I got it. It's the next day, and we're in Abby's hotel room, and she's on the phone with Kathy. And this is how we find out that Kathy is in Florida. Because while on the phone with her, Abby asks if Kathy can come up to her room. And Kathy zooms right on up there. So it's not like, she had to hop on the plane to come to Abby's hotel room. Once Kathy arrives, Abby tells Kathy that she has had it with her. She says she's never had a dancer just not show up before, and that she's pulling Kenzie and Vivi's duet. I'm sure some of Abby's dancers haven't shown up before, but I'm pretty sure like it wasn't just like, no show, no call. I'm sure at the very least, like, the moms told her through the grapevine that, like, this dancer's done with you and they're not coming. Like, I think this is the first time it's been a absolutely nothing from nobody, never. Kathy, of course, responds in the most Kathy way, telling Abby that she is being ridiculous and that sometimes stuff just happens. I just want to point out that we know that if anyone did this to Kathy, like, this is something that Abby would say to Kathy in the inverse, and this is, like, because the two of them have these narcissistic tendencies, like, Abby would try to say this to Kathy if the turntables were turned, and so Kathy is trying to say this to Abby because the turntables are turned. They're just both going to try and say whatever they think is going to get the other person off their back, and also because they think they're above all the laws and the rules. They think that nothing applies to them. So in one way, the two of them deserve to argue with each other in perpetuity for the rest of time, but it's painful to watch. Like, we shouldn't be subjected to it. And we all know that if anyone did this to Kathy, she would have a complete meltdown and scream at them about how not okay it is to do this. So it's hard to watch her try and excuse something that she would find inexcusable if someone did to her. In an interview, Kathy tells us that the reason she's late is because she had to prep her own students for a big competition that they were getting ready to go to. And I think that is fine. That I have no problem with the reason that she didn't make her flight the first day. The issue I have is, again, Kathy is the only person who this reality show didn't fall into their lap. She knew she was going to have to travel at least a couple of times a week out of state to go to. And then on top of that, go to all of the competitions. This is another one of those things where I'm like, I don't know what you thought was going to happen. This has to be, the narcissism sirens thinking that you could just get yourself out of everything, or that they were only ever going to go to competitions that were, I don't know what you thought was going to happen. But this is something that happens with people with narcissistic tendencies, where they just think everything is magically going to go their way. And then when it doesn't, they think that it's okay that they didn't follow the rules that they agreed to follow. Kathy then tells Abby that that Abby is hurting Mackenzie by pulling the duet. And Abby says no, because if you and Vivi had been here, the duet would be happening. You're the one who's causing this. And Kathy retorts that because Abby's the one who makes the ultimate decision, it's actually her. And this is another thing that narcissists do. When you try and hold them accountable, they will turn it back around on you and be like, nuh-uh, I'm not the one who's actually doing this. It's you. Abby's response to Kathy is something that I do not like, and it's very indicative of Kathy and Abby together and of Abby's way of running things. She says she has to make an example out of Kathy to the rest of her studio and the rest of her dancers, that if you don't show up, you don't get to dance. I think there was, of course, Abby's never going to take the sensible way, but there was a better way to do this. I would have pointed out that both Mackenzie and Vivi are 6, and they require the most prep time to get them ready for the stage. And when you take that away from them, like, it's one thing if you just aren't at Pyramid. But if you then miss, 2 days of rehearsal after that, which Kathy is never able to explain why she didn't show up to those, you're making it so we can't get these girls ready, and I refuse to send them out unprepared. I'm not going to do that to them. It might seem mean for me to take away the duet now, but it would be meaner for me to put them out on stage ready to fail and be so much more upset because they froze up on stage. I'm not doing that to them. So I'll be the meanie. I'll take away their duet. They can be mad at me. But I would never put them in a position that is worse.
I mean, she even could have appealed to Kathy's teacher sensibilities and said, I'm not going to put them out there under my name.
Yeah.
And have them not be the most prepared.
And this is what I meant by it is painful for us to be subjected to watching these two argue with one another. We're never going to get any semblance of sensible arguments from either of them because they're just going to keep narcissism sniping at each other and not getting anywhere with it.
And I think it's funny too to have two narcissists in a conversation because they use the tools against each other and they both are completely aware of the tools. And so then they get angry because, well, why didn't I get to use that first? And how dare you try to use my own tricks on me? And it feeds off each other. It is.
And that's why I'm saying, like, they totally deserve each other. Please put them in a room. Like, have them be each other's torture in the bad place. But please don't make us watch. Okay? Next, we get to go on our super fun production field trip of the week, and that is Brooke and Brandon's date. Kelly and Diane are taking them to the Fun Spot, which is a carnival-style amusement park in Orlando. If you have been to Orlando for anything, you've driven by it, you've seen it. It's very much, it looks like a fair, like the carnival portion of the fair that's just there all year round. It doesn't have like actual amusement park or theme park rides. They're all like the kind that can be set up and taken down and moved somewhere else, but they're just there as permanent installments.
It makes me feel like seeing images of Coney Island,
which is a fine business model. It's just it adds to the uncanny valleyness of this episode. Brooke and Brandon go on some rides and they talk about Abby wanting them to have chemistry, and you can tell that production was making the two of them talk about this because
the way that Brooke approaches the produced conversations is always the biggest tell.
Yeah, exactly. She's talking about it like she talked about her hip, like she talks about having to miss having to talk about missing the party, having to go to like her sitting on her bed with the lollipop in her mouth. I don't want to go. Going to dance rehearsal. Brooke will always tell you when producers are making her do something. She won't say the words out of her mouth, but she will tell you visually and auditorily without actually saying the words. You can tell when Brooke is being made to do something. She's being made to do this. Brandon is eager to please. I think he doesn't want to get in trouble with Abby, and he's kind of excited to get to do this, TV show for a week. It's a new novel thing for him. For Brooke, she's like, oh my God, I'm so over it, and they had to make me do this on top of everything else I already have to do. Are you nuts? So he's trying to really engage her with this conversation. Not that he also wants to be a part of it, but he's like, well, they're making us do this. Let's do it. And Brooke's like, no. And here's the part of the drama that I was talking about, that having Brooke and Brandon be duet partners in this group dance, the drama that you would not have seen coming. Because we then go and visit with Kelly and Diane, who are sitting on a bench waiting for the two teenagers to finish their non-date date. And production makes them talk about Kelly having been on the road, and Diane starts crying, saying, you're always with Christy. You never answer my phone calls. Anytime you do answer, you're with Christy. And on the Back to the Bar episode for this episode of Dance Moms, Diane said, she was like, I was told I could talk about some things, and they wanted me to kind of talk bad about Christy, but like, I would just miss you guys. It was nice to be with you guys, but then they also wanted me to do all this, like, stuff and I didn't want to do it. I was just trying to tell you that I missed you, but I wasn't mad. I don't know, it was weird and I didn't like it. And Kelly was like, I had no idea what you were going on about. So I just kept saying, like, it's just dance. I'm just doing dance. Because I was like, what are you talking about, Diane? This has always been our life. You knew what was going to happen. And Diane was like, I know, but I couldn't say certain things. So this whole thing was just super overproduced. And thanks, editors and production. You really just made things so nice for everybody involved, and you didn't cause any weirdness that people were going to have to get over later.
There's more weirdness to come. Don't worry, guys.
Oh, there's so much more weirdness to come. But again, I would not have seen this coming. Like, from Brooke and Brandon having to dance together, I wouldn't have expected a Diane breakdown because she misses Kelly. And like, I wouldn't have expected that to be included in the episode. I don't know. It's weird. Especially because we don't get a follow-up. Like, I don't know why they included Diane having a breakdown, because it's not like they bring Brandon back or anything or do something. They don't. So it's just there and it's weird. We're going to move on to the next day. I will let you know that this portion of the episode will contain some discussions of self-harm. So please skip ahead a few minutes until I say it's day 4. I'm not sure how long we're going to talk about day 3. But when you hear me say it's the next day, it's day 4, you're good to go if talk of self-harm is not safe for you. It's day 3, and we are going to spend the whole day with Maddie at her solo rehearsal. Maddie is doing a lyrical number called Universe, and she tells us in an interview that every week she has a chance to do a solo. It's another chance for her to win another title, because this kid definitely isn't being programmed to only think about one thing. And we get some shots of Maddie dancing, and as she dances, she tells us in voiceover and little interspersed interview clips that sometimes she feels a little bit pressured, but she's a perfectionist. That's what her mom says. And her mom tells her that she just keeps trying until she wins, and that's what she's been doing for a long time. She also tells us that it's her dream to be a professional dancer on Broadway, and that if she couldn't dance, she'd kill herself. This is an 8-year-old. It's a lot of pressure for an 8-year-old. I feel like a bit of this is production asking her to say some stuff, but I also think the way Maddie ended up saying the things is telling about Maddie. Like the way she says her mom tells her that she's a perfectionist and she just keeps doing stuff until she wins. I think that's very Maddie way to word what production was asking her to say.
I do also think, like, especially working with kids and high acuity. So high acuity, for those who don't know, is situations of self-harm, suicidality, high risk sorts of situations. A lot of times younger kids will say that because they don't fully understand the concept. So I have lots of kids who their parents are like, they said, oh, I want to kill myself. Out of anger, and they don't fully, what they mean is that their feelings are so big and they want them to stop. They don't actually mean they want to end their life. So I think in essence, that's kind of where Maddie is like, this is my whole life, and if I don't have this part of my life, I don't understand what life even is anymore.
That's very much how I took it. I understood it to be like, all she knows is dance. Dance is her whole life, especially life at the studio. And she knows her home life isn't always the best. So to her, she doesn't know life outside of dance, and she wouldn't want to. So when she's saying that, she's just like, if I didn't dance, I don't know what I'd do. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't know the words to say that, because to her, life ends without dance. So she's just verbalizing that. She's like, well, if I didn't have dance, I'd die. But it's still so jarring coming out of this, teeny tiny, big-eyed, cherub-faced 8-year-old. If I didn't dance, I'd kill myself. You're like, what?
Now, and I just want to say, like, that's kind of my assumption and how I've worked with kids. But when you are in a high-intensity, often abusive situation, it would not be unheard of for a small child, even as young as Maddie, to have those thoughts legitimately.
I'm not saying and I don't think you're saying that either of us would doubt a child who had sincere suicidal ideation. But I think if anyone had asked Maddie in this moment, like, oh, what would that look like? What would happen? Like, if you asked Maddie about any plans for that, she wouldn't have any. She'd be like, I don't know. Like, that's, I'm not saying that what she's saying isn't serious or that this content isn't serious. I think we're just both aware that she just doesn't know what life without dance looks like, and that's what she's trying to intimate to the adults around her, especially the adults who are making her talk about this. And that's another important aspect to this. She's being made to talk about it. She's like, I just don't know what I do, but she doesn't have that vernacular yet. All right, it is now day 4, and we are in the dressing room with Holly, who tells us that when they're on the road like this, they have to rehearse kind of wherever they can find space. And so Holly is running Nia's solo with her in the dressing room to help her implement. So Holly is running Nia's solo with her in the dressing room to help her implement all of the corrections she wrote down from Abby in her private lesson observation. And she tells us that she thought when she signed Nia up for dance that they'd be getting a lot more support from the dance teachers and that she wouldn't be having to do quite as much of this by herself. She says she knows there's only so much she can do to help Nia by herself. She says she tries to utilize her skills and knowledge as an educator, but that doesn't help with everything. It only takes her so far because she doesn't have the expansive knowledge of dance. And especially since we're doing a Bollywood number this week, like we get some very cute, the next thing is we get some cute shots of Holly working with Nia, and she's saying some things like, oh, that doesn't look very good. Oh, that's yucky. And she's adorable. Kelly is in the dressing room with her. She's wildly entertained. She's like, Holly, you crack me up. I love you. And
like even the actual dance teacher should not be teaching Bollywood. So somebody without dance education trying to teach any Bollywood is like, oh well.
Holly's like, I know she's supposed to have her feet pointed. I know how she's supposed to come out of her chin stand. Holly's not saying this. I'm saying like Holly knows enough about having watched Nia dance for as long as she did and taking the little bit of dance Holly did in her own life. She's like, I know this much about dance and I can use that. And I know this much about teaching and I'm going to use that. But I don't know anything about Bollywood and I don't know that much about dance anyway, let alone Bollywood to help. Like, I can only do what I can do. And again, we get some cute shots of Holly helping Nia, and she's just being so cute, and they're so lovely together. And Kelly is just bowled over with Holly's feedback, and she thinks she's so funny. And Holly is telling Nia that she's in Holly's boot camp this week, and that makes Kelly just like double over and giggle. And she tells Holly like, You're so funny. You're so cute. We love you. And it's nice to see everyone finding some joy in, because Kelly was often left to kind of help Paige by herself because Abby also thought that Paige, it was useless to try and help Paige with anything because Paige couldn't correct herself. So I think Kelly and Holly being together in this moment is really nice. They're finding some joy in a situation that both of them are like, well, this sucks. It is now time for pageant practice because we didn't have enough weirdness this week. We join Abby and the girls on an outdoor patio where Abby is explaining that this competition includes a pageant portion that all of the girls have been registered for. They just don't know which of them will qualify for it yet. And Abby tells us in an interview that this competition has a pageant. They haven't done one before, and she's not sure how it's going to go. Abby tells the girls that they're all going to prepare for the pageant together so that they'll all be ready just in case. And Ray, I just wanted to know if you think that Abby does anything constructive with the girls to get them ready for the pageant. If you think anything Abby is about to do that we watch her do you think she does anything that is constructive with them?
Well, I've seen enough of toddlers and tiaras to say probably not.
Correct. Abby asks the girls to answer some strange questions. She asks Mackenzie what her favorite acrobatic move is. And like when Mackenzie looks down, you know, because you like look down to think, she's like trying to recall the name of her favorite move. Abby goes, at her. And she asks Nia to tell her the meaning or the heritage of her name, Nia's name. And Nia goes, "Can you give me the definition of that?" Like, you couldn't just say, "Nia, can you tell me, do you know what your name means?" She's asking wildly age inappropriate questions. She asks Brooke to go show her pageant walk, so Brooke walks up to then do the pageant walk, and while Brooke is walking up to start her pageant walk, Abby blows her whistle at her and makes fun of the way she walked up to start doing her pageant walk, even though Brooke hadn't started doing the thing yet. It's a hot mess, not that we expected anything else, and she spends the entire time berating and belittling a bunch of little girls.
I always think that it's interesting the way that Abby approaches things and preparing the kids for people to act like Abby would. But in reality, the adults that they end up encountering are completely understanding of the kids' ages and treat them appropriately.
You know what it reminds me of? High school teachers. You remember your high school teachers that said, "This won't fly in college"?
Oh my gosh, let me tell you what flew in college. I had one teacher who brought us snacks with juice boxes because we won the Jeopardy from the study day before. Her approach reminds me of the witch in Into the Woods. Children will listen.
Yes. And not what she says at the end, which is, "Be careful what you say, children will listen." Abby tells us in an interview that she doesn't think that any of her students are great at the pageant aspect of dance because they spend way too much time on technique, even though she yells at them constantly about how awful their technique is. And again, this is one of those times where I'm like, who's going to tell her that that's all her responsibility? She finishes the practice session by telling the girls that if they get on stage and freeze up when they're asked a question, they're going to look like idiots in front of all those people. On the very, 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 very dim, bright side, she does tell them to stop, take a deep breath, and then answer the question, but she doesn't let them practice that or anything.
Well, of course not.
No,
why would they need to breathe?
No. Why would they need to try that? Why would they need to practice it instead of just getting buzzer sounded and whistles blown in their face? Why would they actually need to practice what she just gave them? I don't know.
Even I, as a therapist, will kind of hold my session and be like, okay, let's do some breathing. Like, let's practice breathing.
No.
Because if you can practice it when you're in a good state, you're more likely to remember it when you're not.
We're now in the dressing room with the moms, and Kathy and Vivi make their grand entrance for the week. Kathy, of course, acts like nothing weird has happened at all, and she has Vivi sit down in front of a makeup mirror and acts like she's going to start doing Vivi's hair. And she asks, like, so what's been going on? And Melissa brings up the fact that her absence led to Abby pulling the duet for Vivi and Kenzie, which inevitably hurt Mackenzie. And Kathy says that she couldn't help it. She missed her flight. And Melissa tries to ask her, okay, like, you missed your flight the day of Pyramid. What kept you from coming to rehearsal the other 2 days? And Kathy won't give any other response that she couldn't come because she missed her flight. Melissa, of course, begins to shut down because she senses, like, okay, this isn't going to go anywhere. And that's Melissa's, she has
defense mechanism.
Her fight or freeze is freeze. So she starts to shut down. And Holly and Kelly see that Melissa is shutting down, and they take up for her with Kathy, telling her that her behavior has not been okay this whole dance season, and that what she's doing affected all of them, including this week. They had to be there and, Mackenzie had to sit with them in the dance den instead of going to rehearsal, and they had to put up with, a really sad, angry little kid all week. And that's not Mackenzie's fault. And that's not their fault, but they're all the ones that had to deal with it. Kathy tells them that this does not concern them. Holly and Kelly need to butt out since they aren't part of the duet. And this leads to a pretty nasty argument where Kathy tries to use all of the tools in her narcissism garage, including gaslighting, making herself out to be the victim. They're all being mean to her. She squares up to Holly, and she makes some really vulgar statements about Kelly and Holly doing certain things to parts of Melissa's anatomy to make her into a ventriloquist dummy. This segment ends with Holly telling us that she is just done with this whole situation and that she's frustrated with Melissa for letting Kathy walk all over her like that. And she says she will not be a doormat and she won't tolerate other people being a doormat either. I am hopeful that Holly now has more understanding of why this was happening with Melissa. I think we all know more about mental health now and people's trauma responses, and know that Melissa often got tagged as being a doormat, and there were definitely sometimes in some cases where she would let people take advantage of her. I don't see that this was one of them. I think she's like, oh, okay, this person is being abusive to me. This is how I react when abuse is happening, and I shut down because I can also do the same thing, but I'm not a doormat. It's the next day, and we join everyone, minus Kathy and Vivi, of course, at Abby's Florida house for a bit of a break from the studio. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone, because Abby's mom is there too. And Abby does this real weird formal introduction to announce her mother's arrival. And even though Abby's mother is a pioneering woman in the world of business in the Pittsburgh area, and she was all of the girls' very first dance teacher, they love Miss Marion. They think that she is, all of the girls were devastated when she passed away. They love her. The introduction that Abby gives her mom has that Barney tinge to it. It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel like she's actually like, it doesn't feel like she's saying it for the moms or for the girls. It doesn't feel like she's actually saying it. Doesn't even feel like she's saying it to the cameras. It feels like she's doing it for herself in a very, it has this very weird, I don't know. Like, to me, I'm just like, no one could be here except for you and your mom, and I feel like she would be doing it then too, and it just feels weird. In an interview, Abby follows this up by telling us that her mom is a great, gracious lady to everyone but her. And Rachel, I am dying to hear what you think of this.
A lot of times, particularly with personality disorders such as narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, even antisocial personality disorder, a lot of time personality disorders are made, not born. So it kind of lets us in on why Abby may be the way that she is that there was some sort of attachment disruption with her primary caregiver that led to some of these like learned trauma behaviors, basically. So if Abby's perception is, this is my mother, I love her, I hold her into high esteem, but she doesn't really care about me. She cares about everybody else, though. It really kind of sheds a little bit of light, like, and to the layperson, they may not see quite that much, but with what I happen to know about narcissistic personality disorder, like, it just lets me in on that little bit of like, I wonder.
Yeah. Especially based on some of the stuff we hear later moving forward about Abby and her mom. But then there's also some of the stuff that, like, certain conversations we'll hear later between Abby and her mom. I feel like the NPD started early for Abby, or at least the narcissistic tendencies did, and it shifted her worldview in such a way that Marion can't understand. I think she can understand some of the things she did, but she doesn't understand the way Abby sees a lot of things, especially in regards to children. She doesn't get it. Everyone is having lunch together, and they seem to be getting along well enough for that day. And Abby tells the moms she doesn't get Kathy. She invited her to come to the party, and she didn't even respond saying that they wouldn't be there. And while I fully believe that Abby wouldn't show up and wouldn't RSVP no if some of the moms invited her somewhere, I do agree that this was a crappy thing for Kathy to do. She might have told the producers, like, hey, we're not going to show up for filming at Abby's house. But I think Kathy's also aware that that doesn't cover telling Abby. Like, I think Kathy knows this was a crappy thing to do.
Well, of course she does. She's Kathy.
The girls go swimming, and Christy and Kelly attempt to make martinis, but they make them far too strong, and they end up shrieking and making faces in unison. And Rachel, wouldn't it be great if this day could just end right here? If we could just, that was it. The girls all had fun. Everybody was happy, and that's it.
I do, well, yes, but I do love seeing the game aspect that Abby kind of, and because I played the game that we're about to see in the episode, we used Crisco on the watermelon, and we would throw it in the river at summer camp.
I had never played this game before watching it.
Really?
Yeah, no.
So I sort of grew up playing it at summer camp. You would have two teams, and it would kind of be almost like ultimate frisbee, but with a watermelon covered in Crisco in the river. So I think it was good to see that piece, like a little bit of like friendly competition, like the very low stakes. Like you can have fun and you can still kind of be competitive, but there's nothing to win. There's no consequences to winning or losing, and a lot of it was about teamwork and getting the watermelon out.
I am glad that you saw it that way, because I had a completely different reaction to this. I had never heard of the watermelon game before. Abby has Christy and Kelly grease up this watermelon, and she says, with the watermelon game, you grease up the watermelon, the biggest watermelon you can find, you throw it in the pool. And the person who gets the watermelon out of the pool wins. Christy throws the watermelon in the pool. Abby mimes pushing Christy into the pool while Christy throws the watermelon in, because, of course. And the girls proceed to racing around trying to get the watermelon out. Abby, of course, is screaming from the sidelines, pitting the girls kind of against one another. She doesn't encourage the teamwork until the game's almost over. And at some point during the game, Maddie either gets overwhelmed or she gets hurt. It is hotly contested, still kind of to this day, whether or not Maddie actually got hurt, or much like last week, the week before, she got overwhelmed and started crying, and because she knew it's not okay to cry, she blamed it on an injury. She pulls herself up out of the pool. Melissa rushes over, starts coddling her, and makes some comments about how this whole game is inappropriate and stupid, and it makes the girls seem like boys to be playing this game. And eventually the girls get the watermelon out of the pool. Maddie seems to have intimated that Nia was the one that caused her to get hurt. Holly is understandably upset by this. And to me, I was just like, could you not have just let the girls... Kids don't need to be directed about what to do in the pool, okay? They'll play Marco Polo. They'll play tag. If someone brought a beach ball, they'll figure out they'll figure out volleyball. They'll do something. They don't need you to add something. And they definitely don't need Abby to add something. So I'm glad that it brought nostalgia to you, Rachel, because to me, I was just like, God, can't these kids have one day, even one chunk of one day where they're not being micromanaged to compete against one another, and one of them has a breakdown about it?
One specific one in particular.
Well, one specific one, but I think it feels more like, oh, of course it was Maddie, because Maddie had the same problem last week. But all of the girls at one point or another have a meltdown because Abby is putting too much pressure on them. It just feels like, oh, of course it was Maddie this week because Maddie had an issue again last week. In later seasons, we're going to be like, well, of course it was Kendall, because Kendall's always having a hard time processing what's going on around her.
But I think in this particular circumstance with Maddie, it is higher stakes when you are on a stage being judged. But this is in a backyard pool where no trophies are going to be given.
But
Your
Maddie
name is not going to be called or announced.
Maddie can't get that. Maddie has no ability to parse those things out. This was a competition put to her by Miss Abby. And what does Abby expect from Maddie anytime there's a competition? What does Abby say every time Maddie's the only person who does this? Maddie's the only person who does that. I expect nothing less from Maddie. So when Maddie can't do anything in even something as stupid as the watermelon game, she's going to freak the fuck out. And she did. And then she knows it's not okay for her to freak the fuck out. So what does she have to do? She has to have a reason she's freaking out.
That's fair.
And I hate it. Just let them be the kids. Let them be little. They're in Florida. Let them just...
I do think, too, though, it does not, Melissa's response to Maddie is not helpful. Because in a pool, when you're playing a game, accidents happen. It doesn't matter who did it. You're not bleeding. You're not broken. Yes, maybe it hurt. Yes, maybe you have a bruise. And we're not just gonna like blame somebody. We're not going to like... It's
Melissa's response from last week, just in a different context. And instead of clamping down on Maddie, she's clamping down on the game and looking for someone to blame, because she's also used to Maddie being the best at something. And there was no way Maddie was going to win this game. The watermelon was too big. Maddie got it in her hands at one point, and it pulled her under the water. It wasn't even safe for all of the kids to be playing this game. Especially not the way Abby wanted them playing it, because originally she wanted one kid to win. I could go on and on about how awful I thought this was. But I'm glad that it brought you some nostalgia, Rachel, because this has to bring joy to somebody. It definitely didn't bring any joy to me. It's now competition day, and we start things off with Maddie running her solo in the breezeway between all the hotel ballrooms where the competition is taking place. And while Maddie dances, we notice another little girl rehearsing behind her in the shot. And since we don't usually see something like this happening, where it's the same girl over and over and over again in, multiple shots, we're like, oh, this must mean something. And we find out that this little girl's name is Juliana, and she's known to be an amazing dancer, and she's supposed to be big competition for Maddie. Of course, we do now know that this whole thing was put up by production, and they just wanted Maddie to have someone to be pitted against this week, and it couldn't be Chloe because they put Chloe on a break this week. They make the girls and their moms meet on camera, and this whole thing is so painful to watch. It's so weird.
Uncomfortable.
Juliana's mother, who I will say she might be a perfectly nice, normal, or everyday lady. Normal is setting on a washing machine. I know that, but I just mean like she might not be what we're about to see in this interaction. They're chatting about, like, Melissa's commenting about Juliana's height being about the same as Maddie's, and she asks Juliana if she's a good tumbler, and Juliana says yes, and Melissa points out that Mackenzie tumbles a lot too, and Juliana's mom interjects and goes, now, is it important who wins, or is it important who has the most fun? And both Juliana and Maddie just stand there like, okay, all right.
Maddie did not want to be in that interaction at all anyway.
I don't think either of them did. I think Juliana was a little excited to maybe be on camera, but when this happened, like, Juliana's like looking at her mom and looking at Maddie. She's also like, oh, okay, this is taking a turn. I don't want to be here now either. And neither of the girls say anything. And I feel like production might have told Juliana's mom that she needed to ask this, because she doubles down and she goes, what's the answer? Very loudly. And this prompts Maddie to say, like, I don't care if I don't win. Like, and the way she says it, you hear...
She's not convinced.
Not just she's not convinced, but, like, you can hear the 16-year-old Maddie that Melissa is whining about. Sometimes she goes, I don't care if I don't win. This doesn't sound like an answer from an 8-year-old, but it is so funny. But I very much, like, to me, we know that Maddie does really care about winning. She cares about winning the most. But I think in that moment, she was like, you know what? None of this is worth it. I get yelled at by the adults in my life that I do know. And we've now added a bunch of other adults with cameras that yell at me. I do not need this as well. Nothing is worth getting yelled at by a lady I don't know. Why is this happening? What is this? Nothing is worth it. I don't care. If this is what I have to do, I'll go play soccer. I don't care. Like, she was very done. She was just like, I don't. She even does the, like, lip smack that adults do. I don't care if I don't win. And it was very 16-year-old at her first job. I don't care. It's now time for the pageant, and Abby tells us that Maddie was the only one of her kids to qualify for the pageant portion, and she would expect nothing less of Maddie. On the Back to the Bar episode, I know I'm referring to that episode a lot for this particular episode, but again, this episode of the show was so produced, I had to listen to what Chrissy and Kelly and Diane had to say was happening in real time, because reality TV is not reality. And Christy, Kelly, and Diane all said that they remember that Brooke also competed in the pageant portion. She just would have competed in a different age category. Kenzie and Vivi would have been entered in like the mini or petite or primary category. The middle girls would have been mini or juniors, depending on how this age competition categories worked. And then Brooke would have been preteen or teen. And I don't even know that Abby was purposefully leaving Brooke out. She just might have been saying that Maddie was the only one of the middles, like the middle-aged girls, to have qualified. And editing might have just not included Brooke for some reason, maybe because Brooke didn't win, which the moms also said, like, she didn't win and they weren't worried about it. It wasn't that big of a deal to them, but they were like, it's weird. It's weird that they didn't include it. Maddie performs her solo for the pageant competition, and she dances beautifully, and Melissa cries. Juliana performs her solo for the pageant. I know, right? Big surprise. Juliana performs her solo for the pageant. She dances well, and I have to say, I love her costume. Her costume is gorgeous. It's age appropriate and the prettiest color.
They picked a really weird song, though.
Oh, I wrote that.
Over.
I wrote about that. I said,
because you can hear the actual track underneath it.
Yes, and you can kind of hear it, and it's like this operatic singing track, and what they dubbed over it is like Family Channel YouTube Tyler Oakley do 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 do. It's not that exact song, but it has that vibe, and it is so weird to watch her making like earnest emotions and trying to convey feeling to the do 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 do. It's so weird, and then you can hear the operatic singing underneath. It's so it's so bad. It was done so bad, so bad.
I wonder if that was a production choice.
I think it was just laziness. Production. Abby's talked about it. The girls have talked about it. The moms have talked about it. The producers and the editors didn't know about dance, and so a lot of like all the cast hated how some of the cuts were done, the music choices for dubs and things. They'll be like, this is awful. And so I just think they didn't know what to do, so they just clicked the first thing that was at the top of their playlist, or they were like, this is a cute song. Like, it could have been purposeful, but it could also just as easily have been people who just didn't give a shit and they don't know better.
I feel like if that's a world that you're going to go into, you should at least know a little bit about it.
You don't even have to know a little bit about it. You could just like ask somebody on your staff took a ballet lesson once. Somebody in your life took a ballet lesson once. In an interview, Maddie tells us that when she dances, she doesn't get nervous about the competition or anyone who's dancing after or before her because she's used to it. And it is now time for the interview portion of the pageant. Juliana's up first, and she does well. She does sound very rehearsed. Like, I feel like every little girl that was put in this pageant,
prepared for it.
They not just prepared for it, but they, like, everyone's dance teacher gave them a specific thing to, like, they wrote the lines for them and made them memorize the line. But she gets everything out clearly and concisely. Maddie is next, and she stumbles a bit in her speech, and Abby looks pissed in the audience. Maddie recovers, and she exits the stage, and in the audience, Melissa asks Kelly, how do you think Maddie did? And Kelly says, she walked gorgeous. And it just, I can't watch this part without giggling. It just makes me laugh. I love you, Kelly. You were hilarious. You're everything. We head to awards for the pageant, and Juliana comes first runner-up to Maddie's overall win, and all is right again in Abby's world. It's now time for the group dance, and everyone is getting ready in the dressing room. And Abby is lecturing Brooke and Brandon about making sure that they have chemistry on stage, and how if they don't sell it to the judges, they're going to ruin the whole number, because no week is a good week. And yep, that's A, that's all we care about, and B, it's not a week on Dance Moms if Abby doesn't attempt to give a pep talk that just turns into a bunch of threats. The kids hit the stage, and again, while the choreography for the middle girls is it's not terrible. It's not jaw-dropping. It's not even the best I've seen this group of girls be given for choreography. It's cute, and the music is cute. You keep having to look at Brooke and Brandon, and it is distractingly bad. They're not bad dancers. They're not even executing it bad. It's just uncomfortable to watch. The kids feel uncomfortable. You can tell they feel uncomfortable. And the steps they've been given to do, the work they've been given to do, adds to the discomfort of what you're looking at. And on top of all of that, the girls are supposed to be playing models, and Abby dressed them in polka dotted swimsuits. What is Abby's thing with putting people who are supposed to be models in polka dots? We had Brooke's supermodel costume fiasco with the red polka dot stickers, and we have these polka dotted things, which individually not that bad, but together it's an eyesore. And why does Abby think that what does Abby think models do, and why does she think it includes so much polka dots and floppy hats? What is with this?
I think she is stuck on Sports Illustrated Beach Edition.
Oh, I don't like it. Abby tells us in an interview that she thinks this group routine is a mess, the technique was terrible, and it's at this time that I would like to remind our listeners and Abby that this was all her responsibility. It's her job to make sure the kids and their numbers are stage ready, and if they aren't, that's her fault. Kelly tells us that she knows that Brooke and Brandon are supposed to be falling in love in the dance, but she thinks they couldn't have looked more disconnected, and I agree, but I also don't blame them, and I'm also not upset that they didn't look like hot and heavy, because that would have made this whole thing so much worse. We head to awards for the group, and we find out that this piece didn't place high enough to be given an award on stage, and I would like to thank the judges for not encouraging Abby to do any more of these sorts of numbers. It's time for Nia's solo, and back in the dressing room, she's getting ready. Abby tells us in an interview that Holly is always upset that Nia doesn't have enough time to learn things, and how Holly needs to man up and get over it, and that what she's doing is making Nia weaker, not stronger. And Rachel, I cannot wait to hear what you think about this, because as an educator, this whole thing sent me through the roof. You cannot, like, making any person, let alone a child, conform their needs to what suits your wants and desires is never going to result in that person becoming stronger or better or quicker at anything. It's only ever going to teach them to mask, and that mask isn't actually fixing the problem, or it's going to make them give up entirely.
It's that whole malicious compliance thing. It will teach a child malicious compliance.
Yes.
I'll comply, but I'll do it on my terms.
Well, and it teaches some children that. I don't think that Nia really, especially at this time, would not have had that in her.
No, and I don't know that any 9-year-old would, but it's similar to a very strict parent having, a kid that they don't let talk on the phone or hang out with their friends, and suddenly their kid is sneaking out, or their friend gives them a phone, and so they're texting and hiding the phone under their bed. Like, it is teaching, okay, I will comply to your face. Sure. And that's all.
Abby brings Nia and Holly into the hallway to make sure that Nia gets a chance to run her dance. And of course, she quickly devolves into screaming at Nia about how she's not making any of the corrections that were given to her. Holly tells us that she has started to notice that at dance, Nia's name is never simply spoken to her or said in a positive way. It's always shouted angrily. Abby continues to berate Nia and begins to tell Holly all the things that Nia is doing wrong. Holly suggests to Abby that Nia might not be making the corrections because she's becoming flustered and frustrated, and that Abby isn't communicating in a way that is constructive for Nia, so she's starting to take things personally. Abby, of course, doesn't take this well. She tells Holly that she doesn't even have to be here doing this right now. Not like Abby's the one who asked Nia and Holly to come into the hallway to run the dance with her. Abby tells us in an interview that Holly needs to stop questioning her and trying to get in little digs at Abby. And again, Abby being held accountable, she sees it as being attacked, and it's not the same thing, Abby. Stop that. Abby and Holly's argument continues with Abby making some really nasty comments, similar to the kind that Kathy made about Holly and Kelly doing things to Melissa's body to make her into a ventriloquist puppet. Abby makes some gross comments about cleaning up after Nia, like following her around, like she has to clean up after her, like she's going to the bathroom. It's really gross and like would be a nasty thing to say about anyone, let alone a 9-year-old. Holly mostly remains calm, but she does try to point out that Abby tends to bark at Nia, and she doesn't do that with all the children, one in particular. And Abby says that some kids are different and only need to be told once. And in an interview, Abby says that Holly was calling her a dog when she said that Abby barks Nia's name at her, and she really didn't appreciate that. And this is what I was talking about earlier with narcissists. Like, Abby says that, like, when Christy and Holly tried to talk to her, they were verbally assaulting her. When Holly talked to her last week, it was an altercation. Now Holly say, like, we all know that bark has multiple meanings. Bark on a tree, the bark of a dog, and when you're shouting at someone very gruffly, that can also be barking, but they're not the same thing. And so Abby taking this to this other level of, because she used the word bark, she's insinuating I'm a dog. No, Abby, and she's not insinuating you're a tree either. Back in the dressing room, Holly becomes very upset about what has just happened, and Melissa and Chrissy both become especially worried. This is the first time we really see Melissa kind of have this big reaction to someone else being upset. We will see it going forward. She'll do the same thing when she sees Abby getting upset. She does the same thing when she sees Kelly becoming upset. She becomes very upset herself when she sees someone that she loves and cares about become upset. And I always find that interesting, because when someone is coming at her or, you know, upsetting her, she just completely inverts and shuts down. When someone is coming at someone she loves, she's, yeah. And I think a lot of us can probably relate to that. After some bathroom girl talk with Christy and Chloe and Nia and plenty of hugs, Holly is feeling a little bit better, and we're all ready to watch Nia hit the stage. Both Melissa and Christy have said that they were completely surprised by seeing Holly this shaken up by something Abby had done. They've seen her upset before, but never like this. She was always like their rock, super steady, and so this really worried them. Right before Nia dances, Holly tells us in an interview that she's worried about this dance. She knows Nia's got brand new choreography, a brand new dance, and a bunch of brand new corrections, and that she knows Nia's either going to do the new choreography for the new dance or she's going to do the new corrections, but she doesn't think she can do both because there's only so much information her 9-year-old brain can hold. Nia takes the stage, and she seems to completely nail it, blowing everyone out of the water. Even Abby looks happy. Like, they pan to her in the audience, and she looks happy about it. So, woohoo! And Holly tells us that she is thrilled with what Nia did. We head to solo awards, and Nia takes first place in her category. Not first place overall, that's different. But she does take first place in 9 to 11 for folkloric dance. After awards, Nia comes out into the hallway, and everyone greets her, and they're all squealing and happy. Holly scoops her up and gives her all the hugs and kisses, and it's a nice moment. Back in the dressing room, the moms are starting to pack up, and Abby enters, telling the girls in that Barney way that she thinks their moms are going to kill her. And she announces to the team that they will not be returning to Pittsburgh anytime soon. They will be leaving straight from Orlando to Las Vegas to LA, then to Lake Tahoe. Everyone is shocked. But Kathy, for some reason, who was in the dressing room after the competition, again, this whole week is weird. This whole week feels like a simulation. It doesn't feel like reality at all. Yes. Kathy's disgusted, and she tells us in an interview that she didn't bargain for this kind of travel, and she's not ready for it. I will say, at this point, the series was supposed to be over. The docuseries was supposed to be over, and Lifetime had extended it. So I do understand Kathy's being like, I can't. It's also getting to be nationals season. She does need to return home to get her students ready for nationals. But of course, Kathy's not going to go quietly into that good night. She's going to she's going to Kathy all over everything.
Mhm.
Kathy announces to Abby that they won't be going along any further, that they are getting off the party train. I don't know what parties you were attending, Kathy. You were invited to one this week. You didn't even show up. So what party train? Abby tries to make arrangements to keep Vivi included. She says, is there someone else who can bring her? Can she come with me? And I very much appreciate this. Not that I think that Vivi should be around Abby, but I think it would have been great for Vivi to be around the other girls and the other moms. And Kathy's having none of it. She's like, nope, Grandma can't come. She wouldn't go with anyone but me anyway. I would never let her. Narcissism sirens are wee-wooing so loud. And Abby tells Kathy that that's fine. Everyone's replaceable. This is, I think, the first time we ever hear Abby say that. And Kathy retorts that, yes, everyone is replaceable, even dance teachers. And I wonder if she realizes, I wonder if Kathy realizes that this is only ironic coming from Kathy. Like, any of the other moms could have said that, not ironic. Kathy's the only mom that is like, what do you do for a living there, Kathy? You dance teacher? This episode ends with Abby telling us that she thinks Kathy's a quitter and that it's always the people you bend over backwards for who end up taking advantage of you. And I don't think it's always those people, but I think if you tell certain people that they're the exception to the rule over and over and over again, they will believe that they're the exception to the rule. And Kathy's definitely one of those people. And that is the end of episode 8. I can't say I'm sad to see it end. I think this is one of my least favorite episodes in all of Dance Moms. It's so weird.
The cringiest moments are the only ones that are memorable. Like, there's no, happy, feel-good takeaways.
Aside from Nia winning her solo, no, none. I think our only hot button topics, really, to reiterate, are adults unless a child is in danger, you need to stay out of their romantic entanglements. Again, I can't believe I have to say that, but it does feel like it needs to be said. Let them talk to you. Keep an eye on things like them on the internet. But again, if your kid has a puppy dog crush on someone at their dance studio, you don't need to be overly involved.
I think for me, it's the privilege talk. When it's a verbal conversation, it could be a confrontation or an argument, but it is certainly not an altercation.
I was going to say the angry Black woman issue, which we don't have one. I'm not saying anyone wasn't angry. No, I'm saying the potential to paint Holly as such. So we'll make sure we add some healthy relationship resources for this week. And
I might throw in the invisible knapsack. That would be a fun one for those who want to investigate it.
We have some suicide prevention, self-harm prevention resources available to talk about in regards to Maddie's mention of self-harm.
And if you're a parent and your child makes a statement like that, feel free to take them to the hospital. If you feel like they are truly in danger, you can call 988 or take them to your nearest ER to be assessed for severity.
And our anti-racism, especially in spaces of education resources, stand, and they will remain there, I think, probably in perpetuity, because that's something that is pertinent all the time, all the days, all the times. All right. Any fun takeaways from this episode, Ray?
Fun?
Maybe no more Kathy, hooray. So I think our only, we'll take the small blessing of less Kathy this time and no C class. No. We'll give this episode a C+ for no C class. And I think that'll do it for us this go around. As always, I have been Kacie, not Rachel.
And I have apparently been Rachel, not Kacie.
You have been, and you will continue to be. And we will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
CBT in the TV is hosted by Rachel Sprague and Kacie Campbell. Our show is produced by Rachel Sprague, Kacie Campbell, and Yaakov Paley. editing by Yakov Paley. Our theme song was written, composed, and performed by Emily McNally. Please join us on Instagram and TikTok at CBT in the TV for even more fun and access to the resources mentioned in today's episode. Thanks for joining us.